Carl, will we be able to park in the back of the old St. Joe's?
I do not know. Logistically, I don't. What was the building? She said, will we be able to park in back of the old St. Joe's?
To my knowledge, there's no restriction on parking. So we could park in the parking lots at St. Joe's and go over to the Hindu Building parking lot. They can have chairs set up and everything like that. But you know, there's somebody here. Everybody wake up.
If you get a parking ticket, you could send it to the treasurer's office. Don't. If he's watching this, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. Any other questions?
I have two questions. An ERISA plan, does that automatically activate coverage under the guarantee? That's the first question. And the second is, in one of your letters you mentioned the possibility of lump sum settlements as irrespective of the lawsuit. I wish you would comment on that possibility also.
When you say a settlement, you're talking with the PBGC?
Separate from that.
Separate from the lawsuit?
Let's say they eventually reduce us to 50% or whatever the case may be. Is there a possibility that one may elect a lump sum settlement either individually or with the offer of the whole group?
I'm going to answer the first part of the question because I heard that one, and then I'm going to ask you to follow up with the second one. So the first one is with regard to if I'm an ERISA plan, if this is an ERISA plan, does PBGC coverage automatically come into place? I'm going to give you two answers there. My answer is I believe yes, it does. The PBGC answer is maybe it depends. We're not telling you yes or no. So that's a cute way of saying that's going to be an argument if I am correct that this is an ERISA plan and the PBGC has to accept the fact that this is an ERISA plan. I do believe that PBGC, once it's an ERISA plan, then you are covered by ERISA, by the PBGC, even if you haven't paid a premium yet. I believe once there is a determination, whether it be by the federal government or in our case, possibly by a court, that once it's an ERISA plan, you are covered by ERISA, and among the coverages by ERISA include PBGC coverage. In my discussions with the PBGC, although they have not said absolutely not, they are certainly much less committal on that issue. They're a little more iffy on whether or not that's the case and not really committing to anything. And then the second question was...
In the event that they eventually reduce...
Who's they?
Due to the receivership...
Me?
Right.
Okay.
Reduce the benefits, whatever.
Yep.
60%. And this is pending litigation. Would there be a possibility of people being offered a lump sum settlement? I know sometimes when there's a pension fund that goes bankrupt, there is such a thing as a lump sum settlement offered.
That is something, so the question is as the litigation is progressing, if there's and correct me if I'm not stating your question correctly, if as the litigation continues, there's a need to take some adjustment to the benefits, will participants be offered the option of a lump sum, basically buyout settlement? Is that correct? So what I can say to that is everything is on the table because I have not made a decision or a determination as to what I'd be recommending to the court. Everything's on the table. The advisory committee that meets with me, that is absolutely something that has been discussed as to whether or not there would be a buyout, who would be offered the buyout, would anybody be excluded from that. We're looking at all different options, obviously with the goal of giving people the ability to get out if they wanted to, but protecting the plan as much as possible. So the long answer to your shorter question is if there is an adjustment that is made, it is a possibility that I would be recommending a structure which allows a buyout to either eliminate a reduction of benefits if a buyout is actually exercised by people, or that would otherwise reduce. So if let's take what St. Joe's had suggested when this case started, which was a 40% across the board reduction. If I say, Judge, I think if I can get 20% of the participants to take a buyout of X today, a lump sum payment of X today, then I won't have to reduce by 40%, I can reduce by 10%, something like that. So there may be a combination of those, giving people the option to do what they want to do and see what happens. So everything's on the table.
If they exercise that option, would that include participation in a subsequent recovery from the litigant, from the defendant?
That's a question that has also been bandied about at these meetings, is if somebody were to, the question was, is if somebody, let's say that there is an offer of some type of a buyout settlement and somebody takes it, and then we end up hitting a grand slam home run in the litigation, and there's money to go around. Would somebody be able to opt back in essence? We've talked about that. Mechanically, that's a much more difficult process to deal with. But again, it's not off the table, because at the end of the day, my goal is to get each person here 100% of their pension. That's what I want to have happen. Whether we can achieve that goal or not is a different story, but that's the goal. And so I certainly don't want to, if we have to take positions where things have to be adjusted, I don't want to give somebody the option to do something that would, and then later recover, that they would have benefited from, and to freeze them out. Because at the end of the day, and again, this is an unlikely scenario, so I'm going to use this. If I recover enough money to pay everybody 100 cents on the dollar of what they believed they should be getting, then if I have people who were bought out, that ultimately leaves me with a surplus, and that surplus has nowhere to go, because it was your money that I collected. If I need 120 million, I collect 120 million, but 20% of you took a buyout at 80% of what you would have otherwise been entitled to, then I'll have a surplus with no place to go. So I do have to, if there is a buyout, Julie said the same thing. So if that is something, if I'm proposing a buyout, if that's something I ultimately would recommend to the court, it would have to be a detailed plan that would address that exact issue conclusively on day one, not a we'll wait and see what happens. It would be, if we receive X number of dollars and that allows this to happen, then we will let those people come back into the plan and collect the difference between what they took and otherwise. Or, no, we won't, because they took the safer route and we're going to do something else instead. So it's all on the table. I can't really, because we haven't formulated a plan yet, luckily, because knock on wood we haven't had to yet, that I don't have the details for it. But it has definitely been part of the discussion. Everything that you've raised, we've discussed at those meetings on some level, and we're starting to drill down a little bit more. The problem is I need the new actuary on board so I can get data that I can rely upon, which helps to answer the questions that you're asking as to what are our scenarios. I'll take you one.
What's a buyout? We have to pay taxes on half that money?
You'd have to speak to your accounting professional on something like that. It would be considered, I believe it would be considered some type of income, but you'd have to consult with a tax professional on whether or not you had to pay taxes on that and at what level.
Getting back to the litigation, can you or are you allowed to disclose the names of the 14 defendants?
Am I allowed? Yes, I can, because it's public record. I don't know if I have it in front of me. Do we have the complaint or the names of the defendants?
We can name the ones that you know and
Okay. We'll see if we can pull them up. I mean, I can tell you that it is St. Joe's Health Services of Rhode Island and its board. It's Prospect Charter Care. It is the diocese. And I'll say this, there are 14. But, for example, the diocese are 3 different corporations that are the diocesan corporations. There's Angel Pension Group. There's the Charter... Oh, good old John. Now,
Beats iPhone.
that's right. And who said technology was better than people? Okay, so the following are the defendants: Prospect Charter Care LLC, Charter Care Community Board, St. Joseph Health Services of Rhode Island, Prospect Charter Care SJHSRI LLC, Prospect Charter Care RWMC LLC, Prospect East Holdings Inc., Prospect Medical Holdings Inc., Roger Williams Hospital, Charter Care Foundation, the Rhode Island Community Foundation, the Roman Catholic Bishop of Providence, Diocesan Administration Corporation, the Diocesan Service Corporation, and the Angel Pension Group, Inc. Okay, so as you heard, a number of prospect entities in there and whatnot. So it's 14 defendants. They're all separate entities. But I will say that many of them are represented by one counsel. John, do you need that back? Any other questions?
Comment about what you were talking about in the conference tomorrow with the treasurer, and the legislation wants to, I don't know, it's my understanding, the treasurer will be involved in the hospital conversion. Was not that in law that that was what the Attorney General was supposed to do? And what happened with the Attorney General? I'm not hearing anything about the Attorney General.
Well, when you say you're not hearing anything, so the question is that the legislation that was, I guess I'll say modified, it wasn't added or changed, it was modified, bringing the treasurer and the treasurer's office into the Hospital Conversion Act application process. The question wasn't that the Attorney General's job in the first place? The answer to that is a general yes. That fell under the review portion of the Attorney General's office, or the portion of the review for the Attorney General's office. As we saw in this case, something went wrong in that process, and there is at least there's been a discussion up at the State House that the reason why that went wrong is because the Attorney General's office is ill-equipped to deal with financial data like that and to properly vet it and assess and evaluate the impact of a transaction on it, and to have people like the treasurer and their office, who that's what they do, come in is just a better practice. So this is to improve upon what appears to have been a soft spot of the analysis that was already in place. When you ask what happened to the Attorney General, you haven't heard anything about the Attorney General. I'm going to interpret that, and correct me if I'm wrong, as I did not say the Rhode Island Attorney General is named in that complaint. What I will say is that there are other parties that are not named in that complaint. The reason why a party is not named in the complaint may be because we didn't believe that there was any wrongdoing associated with them, or what our investigation didn't reveal it. It also may be that the value of pursuing will be much more expensive than the value of what you might get back. I'm not speaking to whether or not the Attorney General had or did not have liability, but I think I've said before that the Attorney General has some immunity in the state of Rhode Island, and to sue the Attorney General, you are capped at $100,000 per claim. Now, there would be an argument if we believe the Attorney General did something wrong. There's an argument that each one of you is a claim, and so it's $2,729 times $100,000. But that would be a very tough road to take. And if we ended up being wrong, we're capped at $100,000. So again, without saying whether or not we believe the Attorney General did anything wrong or not, if we did determine that there was a problem with what the Attorney General did, I might still not have sued because of those limitations on it. With other parties, there may not be that immunity, that protection, or that cap, but similarly, the damages that they may have caused did not rise to the level where it might be worthwhile for us to pursue it. So, as I tell my private clients, you don't want to pay me $100,000 to collect 50. It just doesn't make sense, and those are the types of things. So the fact that a party isn't here, there could be multiple reasons why we did not name them in the complaint. One could be that we didn't see liability, but there could be other reasons as well. So you can't draw an inference that somebody did something or didn't do something as a result of what happened here. With the exception of the ones that are named, clearly we think that they did have a hand and a substantial hand in what happened. Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
The people that are not collecting yet, but can collect, would they be in jeopardy of losing everything if there is a cut or if there is a buyout?
No, all of you are vested. There isn't anybody in this plan that is not vested. So the only way that somebody who is not collecting is at jeopardy of never collecting is if the plan completely fails and we run out of money and there's no money to pay out to anybody. As long as I'm in place and there's money, and either we're collecting it or managing it, then as people come online in terms of either early retirement or standard retirement age, they can make their assessment as to whether or not they want to apply at 55 or 56 or 60 or 65, and we'll process that application. So as long as I'm in place, there's a reason for me to be here, and that means that there's money there to distribute. May not be as much as people wanted, as who knows what's going to happen in a year or 2 years from now, but as long as I'm here, there's going to be money to distribute, and everybody's vested. Yes.
This litigation, you said it could go on for like 12 months or longer?
Yeah, 12 months was like a very, that was before you see anything even remotely substantive going before the court.
Well, I assume the defense are going to like stall as much as they can. Do you think, does it ever come to a point where the judge would say, enough is enough?
Yeah, judges have tolerance levels. Every judge is different, and it also it depends on the reason why a party is asking to further delay something or to get an extension. Sometimes there are very legitimate reasons that happens, and sometimes the reasons are a little bit more thin. And so this is in front of Chief Judge Smith of the federal court on the federal side. Very good judge, very thoughtful judge. And he's the chief judge of the federal court. He didn't get there by accident. Very bright man, and he maintains control over the cases that he has. He certainly lets the parties litigate their cases, gives them the opportunity to discover the information and to make the arguments. But he is not a fan of letting things linger. Nobody in the federal court, quite frankly, or even the superior court, is a fan of letting things linger. They will let the parties make the arguments, and they may or may not agree with them. But just because a party may want to try to delay, doesn't mean it will automatically happen. They may ask, and they may get denied, or they may get granted, and it all depends on the request, the nature of it, and the circumstances. When you say expedited on our side, you mean the plaintiff's side?
Because you have pensioners that are elderly, when you have a malpractice run, you can expedite that type of case based on the age of the defendant.
Right.
Can you do that?
We can ask. We have already at least, and that'll come up in the Rule 16 conference, on any concerns remember I said any concerns any party has. So we feel, and obviously we're standing in a little bit of a catbird seat because we've already done 10 months of document discovery, where we can say, look, this just needs to move. We can't delay this. But we've got the other side saying, yes, Judge, it needs to move. We don't disagree with that, but we have a right to do what we need to do, and the rules allow us this much time and that much time and whatnot.
And as a follow-up, would they order
defended by defendant, or yet
It's possible that that could come up. It's possible, but we are trying to do this as a class action. So there is also the process of certifying the class, approving counsel for the class, things like that. So once it is determined as a class, then it's the class. Okay.
Court hearing on the 26th, I know they're all important. I know like the last one was really important.
Right.
And for those of us that still work, it's kind of tough to get to them. So is this 26th one, is that one of those where you really think we should go to? Or is that like just one of the kind of, well, like regular ones?
All of my reports are very important. You are hearing right now what I'm going to be reporting to the court. You're actually hearing it in much more detail. The report on the 26th of July we're 30 days removed from the last one. And I'm basically going to be telling the court what I told you in the beginning. Everybody's been served. We've entered into a stipulation to stay the Superior Court action, the state court action, and the Rule 16 conference has not yet been scheduled. We're waiting for that to get scheduled before things can move on the federal side. The other thing of significance, and I'll tell you now, so it's I'm sorry, but this is what's it called when you tell somebody what's going to happen in a show before it actually happens? Spoiler alert. If you want to go to the hearing and you don't want to know what's happening, just plug your ears. As you know, we also filed a motion to intervene in an action that was connected to the charitable assets that transferred over. So I'm also going to be letting the judge know that the parties entered into a consent order on that, which preserves the $8.2 million that got transferred as part of that charitable asset transfer, because it's our contention that that money should have gone into your plan and not over to the Rhode Island Foundation for the charitable purposes. So we entered into an order which said pending litigation and a full hearing on the motion to intervene, that money will be preserved, with the exception of there's a federal requirement that up to 4.5% of the money must be distributed every year. Otherwise, the fund gets hit with a penalty equal to 100% of that amount. So rather than distribute that money to the IRS as a penalty, we have allowed that annual 4.5% can continue to be paid in the ordinary course. So at least it goes to the purpose that it's intended to and not to the IRS. But other than that, the 8.2 is being preserved. So that's the other thing I'm going to mention to the judge. Those are I guess the four most significant things to tell the judge since the last hearing. So beyond that, there's not much more that's going to be discussed at that hearing. Okay? It's very important, but you don't have to be. You just got a preview of it. Okay? I know. I work too, but I'm there that day. That's why. On the original complaints? For everybody. Yeah. It's a good thing. This is why I bring Julie, because she remembers everything. There was also a stipulation entered into which set for all defendants August 14th as a date to answer. Under the rules, you have a certain period of time once you're served with a complaint to answer. The defendants had asked for a little bit more time for that. And based on the differences in terms of serving everybody and whatnot, we agreed that everybody could have until the 14th. That's the date that's set right now. I will say, as a lawyer, you typically, if you get that request for an extension the first time, you routinely grant it. Because if you don't, you go into court, the court's going to grant it, and you just look like you're being difficult. So you routinely say, sure, we'll extend that out a little bit more, we'll give you a little extra time. I don't know, as I stand here now, whether or not the parties will be asking to extend that beyond the 14th. But as of right now, everybody has a deadline of August 14th to answer the complaint, which the one thing I will, to temper any excitement, the answers are not very helpful. When you're answering a complaint, it's usually admitted, denied, asked for a conclusion of law, which doesn't need to be answered. It's very quick answers, and then they add their defenses and potential counterclaims. That's where you really want to see what they've done in terms of their answers and their counterclaims. The answer itself usually doesn't reveal anything earth-shattering. So don't think that when that 14th comes that we're going to find out all this information, because they're going to be admitting to things. They won't admit to it, or they'll say that they don't have to, and then we may have to compel further responses. Any more questions? Going once, going twice. Sold. Go.
If I get my pension continued, I might be able to afford it. Early on, we were told that the Rhode Island State Police were also having their own investigation. Has anything come of that?
I have not heard anything from the Rhode Island State Police. Because you've asked the question, I'm going to inquire as to whether or not that investigation is still open, because they can open and close an investigation without letting anybody know about it. So I will call over. That would be most likely in the financial crimes unit of the state police. So I'll call over to that division and find out if that investigation, one, if we had received proper information that they opened it in the first place. And if they did, is it still open and pending? They won't give us details, but they'd at least tell me if it's open. The question is that early on we had heard that the Rhode Island State Police had started to conduct an investigation of their own, which would be on the criminal side. And do we know what, if anything, has gone on with that investigation? So my answer is as of now, I do not know whether or not that investigation went anywhere, or even, quite frankly, I don't know if we ever fully confirmed that it was happening. So I will confirm that, and I'll either post something to the website, or at the next meeting that we have in about a month, I will give you guys the update on that. John, do you want your paper? Oh, he's on the phone. All right, so he doesn't want his paper yet. Okay, so any other questions? If not, then go ahead.
On the pension, now you're handling the pension and all the information. Why do all these other people have lawyers if we have you? What is the benefit of having a lawyer and not having?
Are you talking about the different groups?
Yes.
Well, the difficulty is that I'm the receiver who is representing and who has control over the pension. Each one of you has an aligned interest. You all want to get your pension. But depending on what I recommend to the court, you may not like the way you're treated in that scenario versus somebody else because you worked longer, or you believe you're entitled to more, or something like that. So the different groups that have formed, which as of right now, there's a group that is union members. There is Arlene Violet's group, which is a group of the more senior members of the vested participants. And then there's a group that Jeff Castle is representing, which is, it's kind of a mix of people as well. And they're really just looking at this, and they've decided that, for example, Arlene's group, we want to make sure that whatever plan is recommended by the receiver and ultimately approved by the court, we believe that it's the best plan for us, our people, our participants. It's not necessarily that there's, I guess I'll call it like infighting. There's not infighting, but there are definitely different interests. If you're a 35-year-old participant, you look at the world and this pension differently than a 55-year-old, than an 85-year-old. And so those groups are formed to just have counsel to say, this is what I think may work for you, or this is what the receiver is recommending, and this is how I see it impacting you. It's just a way to provide counsel for those things that are going to be more wide sweeping in terms of their impact. As if you've been to any of the hearings, other than to voice support, for whatever's being stated. Counsel for all three groups stay relatively silent and observe. The place where they're most active is in the advisory committee meetings with me. And even in those meetings, they ask questions, but it's really your fellow participants that are really asking the questions and coming up with the different ideas and the different problems that they see with regard to things. Well, I know that Arlene is doing it pro bono with Rob Senville. I believe that the union's attorney is also, that's part of the union's deal with its participants. I cannot speak for Jeff Castle. I do not know. I have no involvement and no say in what, if anything, he's getting compensated or how. He's not charging? He's doing it pro bono as well. So it appears that all three groups that have been formed at this point have counsel that are doing it for free. You can contact Arlene, or I'm sure John can give you, or I can give you, if you shoot me an email, I can get you the contact information for both Arlene and Rob, as well as Jeff Castle, to see if you feel you'd fit better in one group versus another. Sure. Any other questions? You're very welcome. Thank you. All right, with that, everybody have a very good night. Enjoy the rest of the month of July. See you in about a month.